But right now, he's a really struggling player mentally and physically. The spatial awareness that I think a lot of people thought was a strength coming out has not really been a strength in the NFL. He doesn't seem to have an innate sense of space in terms of the NFL game.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday. That means the Honorable Greg Cosell is here and class is in session. Can't wait to ask Greg about these three huge matchups and some of the other things going on around the NFL. We'll already have winners tomorrow. I love sending you guys signed press passes, signed merch, whatever you want in the mail. All you have to do is somehow engage with @RossTuckerPod on any social media platform, or @RossTuckerNFL if I'm posting about the show. A reply, a comment, a quote post, whatever. We see it. Or you can just take advantage of any of our awesome sponsors, westshorehome.com/Ross, or buy a box for a great holiday gift, future fans, using the code Ross. I love the YouTube shout outs as well, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL. All you do is make a comment there. I'll do a cameo style video for you, which people love. Anyway, a lot to get to. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Greg Cosell, of course, presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. Greg, there's a lot to get to. Let's start with tonight, of course.
Yeah.
It's always fun when we have a big one on Thursday night. I'll be in the booth for Westwood One with Iron Eagle.
Beautiful.
Really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's the Commanders and the Eagles. I'm sure you have stuff to say about both teams. I'll just give you a blank slate. Start where you want.
I mean, there's a lot to say here on both sides, and we can't get into everything. I will say this, that I thought last week the Steelers had a really good game plan approach against the rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who probably looked the most uncomfortable of any of his games this season. And one reason I think for that, well, there's two reasons. Number one, I think they did a really, really good job, and this was obviously game plan, with disguise and late coverage rotation. You're always trying with any quarterback, but certainly with a young quarterback, to try to make him have to think through the process as he takes his snap. Because now, as time starts moving, and it happens very quickly, as you know, if you're just uncertain as to what you're seeing, that becomes a problem. The second part of that is because the Steelers are very good with their defensive front and very good with pass rush, and as you know from studying since you're going to be in the booth, that the Commanders' O-line is, playing with a lot of backups, and I assume that's the case again tonight. I assume Trent Scott will still be at right tackle. I don't know what Wiley's situation is. They've been playing with the rookie Brandon Coleman at left tackle. I think their O-line is probably by NFL standards average at best right now. And last week the Steelers were able to get more bodies around Jaden Daniels, and he started to play a little fast. So those are just two things that the tape showed. So the question is, will the Eagles be able to exploit that in the same way that the Steelers were able to exploit it? Now, having said that, it's not as if the Commanders didn't score any points. They don't turn the ball over. They've turned the ball over 4 times all season.
It's very, very impressive when you think about a rookie quarterback and how well he's taking care of the football. In particular, actually, Greg, on the road.
Yep.
His road numbers are really impressive for a rookie quarterback. Now they're going against a team in the Eagles. I guess I'm curious about both sides of the ball for the Eagles, but in particular, Greg, and I know they haven't played great offenses, but the defense, some of the numbers this Eagles defense is putting up, it really is good. Super impressive.
Yeah. I think that there's a couple of players that stand out week to week with the Eagles defense, just if we're talking individual players. I think Zach Bond, who quite frankly, no one knew if he could play stacked linebacker because he'd never really done it in the NFL. And as you may recall, he didn't do it at Wisconsin, where he was essentially an edge pass rusher. Zach Bond has played at a really high level at stacked linebacker. The other player is Cooper DeJean. Since Cooper DeJean has become a starter, I believe week 5, the Eagles have played the second highest percentage of nickel defense in the league, close to 90%. They do not play with 3 linebackers. They play nickel. And DeJean is the kind of player that can be a factor in your run game as well as, obviously, in coverage as a slot corner. So the Eagles' defense has changed dramatically. I would bet, they've played a lot of single high in recent weeks, but at its core, the Fangio defense starts with a quarters look, a 4 across look, and then you can go to anything from that. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them do more of that this week. And then to show Jaden Daniels that quarters look, and then he's not going to know until the ball snapped what they might move into. So it would not surprise me to see that this week.
It's interesting, Greg. On the other side of the ball, Commanders defense doesn't have a lot of big-time players, but they've been solid. And then the Eagles offensively, Hurts, as a former offensive lineman, at times, some of the times when he holds the ball and takes sacks, Greg, drives me nuts. But he also bought time twice and had awesome touchdown passes to Goddard and Johnny Wilson, where he's found time. Sometimes he sees that window, steps up, and makes a play. Other times he thinks he sees a window, steps up and gets sacked. He steps into a sack.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things stand out. Number one, the Commanders, as you know, they have a great D-line rotation. Last week, 9 defensive linemen played at least 15 snaps. So they have a lot of D linemen who play, and they're really good up front. And just like I mentioned, Zach Bond, I think Frankie Louvu, I think he's one of the top 3 linebackers in the NFL in terms of the multi-dimensional nature of his game and the way he's deployed. Now, they told you by the fact that they traded for Marshawn Lattimore, who will not play tonight, he's not yet ready due to a hamstring, they told you that they're not real comfortable with their corner position on the outside opposite Benjamin St. Juste, who's a nice player. They've been playing the rookie Mike Sainristil outside. It would not surprise me to see the Eagles go after that tonight, because Hurts does work really, really well outside the numbers. He'll, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. I would expect that St. Juste might travel a little this week tonight to play against A.J. Brown, but that leaves Devonta Smith versus Sainristil, and I think that's a matchup the Eagles would look to exploit.
Let's talk about one of the best rivalries in the NFL. It's the Packers. It's the Bears. The Bears made an offensive coordinator change. Man, Greg, it has been ugly for them offensively in recent weeks. What are you seeing? What are you seeing when you watch the Bears offensive tape?
Yeah, I think that, a couple of things really stand out when you watch Caleb Williams. And by the way, I'm just not a big fan of those coaching changes. I know that PR gets involved. People may or may not remember that it was Shane Waldron who resurrected Geno Smith's career 3 years ago. So Shane Waldron did not become a bad coach. So when you watch Caleb Williams, there were a couple of things that concerned people when he came out of college. Number one, Ross, he was sacked over 80 times, by the way, in his 2 years at USC. There were people that were concerned that translates when a quarterback gets sacked that often. Very often that's on the quarterback. And right now, when you watch Williams on tape, he too often lacks an effective internal pocket clock. He stays in the pocket too long holding the ball when he doesn't feel he has a throw, which is very often, by the way. And right now, you can see watching the tape, everything is happening a little too fast for Williams. He's not been able to slow the game down mentally, so he gets stuck in the pocket. And then when he gets stuck in the pocket, he often gets sacked. And when he tries to move, it's not the same as it was in college. You can't just run around, and he tends to run around backwards. And you can't do that in the NFL. So he's got a number of things that really stand out on tape that he has to work through. Now, can he work through those things? Who knows? Could he be better this week just with a change? Sometimes that happens. We don't know. But right now, he's a really struggling player mentally and physically. The spatial awareness that I think a lot of people thought was a strength coming out has not really been a strength in the NFL. He doesn't seem to have an innate sense of space in terms of the NFL game.
Well, the only thing I'll say that I think is so interesting about that Greg, I think everybody that came on my show before the draft liked Jaden Daniels more than Caleb Williams. They either said that or they made it sound like that. You know, Orlovsky and you and Chase Daniel and Phil Simms and Sean King and like everybody that came on, you know, they said that Daniels was the better pocket passer, the better progression reader. We knew he was the better runner. So I guess the thing with Williams was he was a better play
Well, Williams,
extender.
look, again, you're the one thing I hope people understand is when you evaluate quarterbacks, whether they're coming out of college or in the NFL, and when coaches call me because they want to talk to me about quarterbacks, is they have strengths and they have limitations. The whole point of building an offense around a quarterback is playing to the strengths, minimizing the limitations. Some weeks you can do that better than others depending on the opponent. But what always stood out about Williams, even for those that like Daniels more or Drake May more, whatever the case may be, is he throws a beautiful ball. And you're starting with that. I mean, he throws an absolutely beautiful ball. But that in and of itself, as you well know, Ross, is not enough just to be a great NFL quarterback.
All right, we got some other big time matchups to get to, but I'm selfish and I'm calling the Raiders and the Dolphins for CBS on Sunday.
Okay.
So I do want to ask you about that game. The Dolphins have been much better since Tua came back. They actually looked pretty darn good on both sides of the ball, I thought, Monday night. Just kind of and I'll say this too, Greg's really studying them this week. I don't care what anybody says. Tua's mental processing, quick release, timing, and accuracy, he's elite. He is elite. It's not as easy as he makes it look.
No, his game, and he's as good as there is in the league at timing, rhythm, window throws between the numbers. And I don't think they're even all the way back yet, Ross, to be quite honest with you. I think that they still, if you go back to last year when he led the league in passing yards, I mean, it seemed every single week those window throws between the numbers, which are very hard. I mean, that requires incredible timing and anticipation. That's his game. You have to build your pass game around that because that's what he is. He does it at a really high level. And as I said, watching the tape, I don't even think they're totally there yet. I think they're just going to continue to improve.
You know, the other thing I'll say about that, watching him Monday night, it actually reminded me a decent amount of Hurts on Sunday. You know, Tua tried to extend some plays, Greg, and he took some sacks that you just cannot take. But in fairness, he extended a couple and made some big plays, which you never talk about him as. You never think of him in that way.
And he'll do that once in a while, but my guess is defenses don't game plan for that. If he does it, you tip your hat, but you're not game planning to prevent him from doing that because that's not really how he plays.
Okay, Greg, you heard it here first. Ravens, Steelers, one of these teams is going to win by a field goal because that's what happens every time the Ravens and Steelers have ever played in the history of time. What intrigues you about this one?
Ugh. Well, this is one of those. If you look at Ravens offense, Steelers defense, of course, is always really good. Lamar has sometimes struggled against that defense. They're just a really good defense. They're fast. They're well disciplined. They're smart. But one of the things about the Ravens, and let's assume it happens because it's happened against every team, Ross, is they get into the red zone more than any team in the league, okay? And they are so good scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and there's obviously multiple reasons for that. One being what they do schematically, which is really good. One player to keep in mind, who I think, and he's not one of their big names, but I think he's a really important piece, is Justice Hill. You'd be surprised how many receptions he has for a guy that probably plays 20 snaps a game. And the other thing, of course, is always the Lamar factor, the movement ability, the ability to win after the defense wins. And that's what you get a lot with Lamar. The defense can win tactically on any play, and particularly in the red zone, and then Lamar makes it another play, and he does something special. That side of the ball is really intriguing to me. Of course, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say one point I'll make. Keep an eye on Keaton Mitchell over the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Talking with Harbaugh before the Browns game, Greg, it was very clear that they are super excited about Keaton Mitchell. So I think they'll start to ease him back in.
Great
moving
point, because he
forward.
only played a couple of snaps last week, but maybe he'll play more this week. You never know. But they've got a lot of weapons, and they're an odd offense in terms of the NFL because they play the fewest snaps with 3 wide receivers of any team in the league. Now they played more last week, and was probably because Likely was inactive. So we'll see, because Deontay Johnson did not play many snaps last week, so that's another factor. You mentioned Mitchell. We'll see if Deontay Johnson gets more snaps as well.
What about just anything on the other side of the ball? Russell Wilson obviously had a beautiful throw to Mike Williams. It feels like a really nice fit there with Wilson's willingness to throw
and Kyle Hamilton's
one-on-one
gonna,
balls.
And Kyle Hamilton's going to be out, and that's a big, big loss. You could argue that he may be the key to that entire defense because of the versatility that he brings to the table. With he can play in the slot, he can play safety, he can blitz. He's one of those true multi-dimensional players. So that is a significant loss for them. Obviously, they now have Mike Williams, who caught the touchdown. He didn't play that many snaps. He'll play more. And George Pickens, again, I've said this before, and again, at this point in his career, is he one of the top 2 or 3 best receivers in the game? No, not yet. But just in terms of physical traits, Ross, he is absolutely top 5 now. Whether he gets to the point where we can count on him every week and say he fits into the category of among the very best, that remains to be seen. But he is a really tough player to defend, and I'm going to be really curious to see how the Ravens go about that.
Bills, Chiefs, arguably game of the year so far this year, Greg. What are you thinking in this one?
Well, there's a history here. They seemingly play every single year, some years twice. And keep in mind that last year you go to that playoff game, and the Bills offense, they almost played that game last year to minimize risk, because the longest play they had against the Chiefs last year was 18 yards. They really didn't try to push it down the field. They're not really, even with Josh Allen, the way Joe Brady is orchestrating this offense, they're not really trying to push it down the field. Now, Coleman will be out again. I don't know Amari Cooper's situation. He did not play last week. But they are really kind of a condensed passing game and really a running football team, and they score a lot of points. So it's hard to say that they're doing anything wrong, but they don't really push it down the field, which is surprising given Josh Allen. But the Chiefs are a really, really difficult defense to play against, and it would not surprise me, again, if the approach is more to minimize risk than attack with big play concepts, because there may be no deep coordinator in the league who uses his defensive backs better as blitzers than Steve Spagnuolo, and it's really difficult.
2 thoughts on that. One is Keon Coleman, even though he's not a burner, he is a guy that can make some plays down the field, but he'll be out. And it makes it a little bit surprising that they moved on from Valdez-Scantling, because he did provide that, right? Like, they would put him in the game. You had to be aware of the deep posts, like he can run. But they moved on from him, and then he just had his best game in years for the Saints.
How crazy is that?
Crazy. All right, what about the Chargers and the Bengals? That's a good Sunday nighter, Greg. That's an important game for both those teams.
Yeah, and two teams that play totally differently on offense. By the way, I thought Burrow's game, even in the loss against the Ravens, was one of the best quarterback games of the season. But the Chargers are another fascinating team because it's Greg Roman is the offensive coordinator. And for people that may not remember, Greg Roman, he was out for a year, but he was the Ravens coordinator prior, and he's a run-first coordinator. And that's basically the way the Chargers play. And people know that he used in Baltimore Patrick Ricard, who was essentially a 5th offensive lineman. He's listed as a fullback, but he was essentially a 6th offensive lineman, because he's not really an eligible receiver, even though he was. So he's doing the same thing with the Chargers. They play a defensive end named Scott Matlock as basically their Patrick Ricard. He lines up as an I-formation fullback. He lines up as an attached tight end. He lines up as a wing tight end. He lines up offset in the backfield. And he plays 20 snaps a game, and they run the football. And there's not a lot of mystery in what they want to do, but there's a ton of multiplicity in their run game concepts. So they're a very difficult offense to defend in terms of run support, how you build your run support, because they're so multiple with their run game concepts.
It's such a good point because they can insert that guy so many places.
Yep.
And it creates extra gaps that defenses are not used to going against.
You're right.
First of all, they're not used to going against those extra gaps. Secondly, they're not used to taking on a man that big, the people that have to take him on.
That's a
off the ball backers,
Yep.
DBs. It makes them very uncomfortable, and they're very awkward doing it at times.
No, because sometimes, depending on the nature of the run game, when he's an ISO lead type blocker, depending on the nature of the defensive front, sometimes he's doing an ISO lead block on a safety. That happened this week against the Titans with the safety Mike Brown, and he just pancaked him. Because he's 275 pounds or 280 pounds.
All right, what about, Greg, the Seahawks and the Niners? That's another one, kind of like the Chargers-Bengals, where it's super important for both teams.
Both teams. And the Seahawks coming off a bye. It's interesting with tape study, and I had this conversation with Hugh Millen, who the former NFL quarterback who does a ton of work with Seattle, and we were talking about Dotson, the linebacker, and we were saying, God, on tape, he just doesn't look very good, and he's a weak link in their defense, even though he was their leading tackler, because the tape told you that, and then what do they do this week? They cut him. So, the tape tells you. None of this, when you're watching tape, none of this is bold and controversial. But I think the 49ers are the bigger story now. Last week, I thought that their offense with the pass game really started to look like the offense. You could say it's because McCaffrey's back. He wasn't the one making the catches, but they can do so much more with him from a formation perspective, from a motion perspective, and they really started working the middle of the field exceptionally well with their pass game, which is the foundation of the Kyle Shanahan pass game. So I would expect them to continue to get better.
Love it. Check him out on social media at Greg Cosell, so you always know what he's up to, what he's doing, including the awesome NFL matchup show on ESPN, ESPN2 every weekend. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
Greg is like a gift to all of us every single week. You know what else is like a gift? Getting your significant other a brand new shower. How about this? My guys over at westshorehome.com, and not just guys, gals, everybody, they are doing free installation plus 18 months, no interest, no payments, and for showers only. Not the full bath remodel, although, by the way, they have the full bath remodel, but they're guaranteeing install by Christmas or it's free. Talk about an amazing Christmas gift for your kids, for your wife. That is incredible. Highly recommend it. That'll be like the most excited your wife has been for something you've given her in a long, long time. Or your kids. I did it. westshorehome.com/Ross. westshorehome.com/Ross. Best Christmas gift ever. All right, it is your last chance to take advantage of this awesome contest via my friends over at Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka and an official vodka partner of the NFL. They are giving fans in select areas of the country a chance to win the ultimate game day experience, from tickets to sideline passes and so much more. Just head to WeDoGameDays.com until November 15th, that's this week, to enter your chance to win. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. No purchase necessary. 21 plus. Ends 11/15/24. See rules at website for participating area and other important details. Sponsored by Diageo Americas Incorporated, New York, New York. Again, go to WeDoGameDays.com. Smirnoff, We Do Game Days.
Tux Takes.
All right, Ross, the starting quarterbacks were announced in Indianapolis, Jacksonville, and Vegas. Anthony Richardson, he is back as the starter in Indy. The Jags, they are sticking with Mac Jones, and the Raiders, they are going once again with Gardner Minshew.
Well, I think Minshew pretty clearly is probably the best option the Raiders have. I don't know that that's a great option, but that's the best option they have right now. I think he's probably a better player than Desmond Ridder, and obviously the Raiders do as well. It does sound like Trevor Lawrence, Jack, might be able to come back for the Jags after the bye, and that would be a situation where, boy, Doug Peterson really needs Trevor Lawrence to come back after the bye to be healthy, to play very well, and for them to win out after the bye, you would think, to keep his job. And then as for Anthony Richardson, I don't like the toggling back and forth by Steichen. I probably would have given Flacco one more week against the Jets defense that Kyler Murray just absolutely torched. My guess, though, Jack, is they saw how Kyler Murray torched the Jets defense, including with his legs, and thought, you know what? This is actually a great game to build some confidence for Anthony Richardson. This is a great game for Anthony Richardson to come out and kind of get back on track.
Bears, they released offensive lineman Nate Davis, while the Jets, they claimed Potato Empire heir Connor McGovern off waivers from the Saints.
I don't get it.
You didn't see that article last week that he's like the heir to a $500 million potato company?
Connor McGovern?
Yeah.
No. The Jets won? The Saints won?
Yeah.
How would I see that?
Because it was trails everywhere. I saw it.
I did not see it. And Nate Davis, boy, that was a bad free agent signing for the Bears. I think he got $20 million for like a year and a half for 13 starts. Didn't really play well. That's bad.
And we have another big Thursday night football matchup tonight. The Eagles, they're hosting the Commanders. Who do you like in this one?
It's presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. It's funny because if you follow me on social media, I already did the Ross report and made my prediction, so I'm not going to change it now. I do think it'll be a competitive game. The Commanders have been really good on the road this year. Jaden Daniels in particular has been fantastic, but the Eagles have clearly the better team. They're playing at home, short week, hard to pick the Commanders. It'd be a super impressive win if the Commanders can get it. I don't see it happening. I'm still going to stick with 27-24 Eagles.
Couple quarterback notes. J.J. McCarthy, he underwent a second knee surgery, and Giants GM Joe Shane says Daniel Jones' decision will be a, quote, football decision.
So the J.J. McCarthy news, that is one to keep an eye on. And I think at Pro Football Doc, our guy, Dr. David Chow from SportsInjuryCentral.com, I think, he said that yesterday as well. That's not normal. A second surgery already for a young guy, that's not normal. That is concerning to me. As for Joe Shane, I don't even know what that means. I mean, he has an injury guarantee. If he gets hurt, they have to pay it, which affects the salary cap, which affects the football. So I don't even know what that means. I do know, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. You guys know, number one, it's the best holiday gift. Number two, I will personally send you a signed autograph if you get one of these amazing stories for any loved one in your family. Get it for anybody, I don't care. myfrontpagestory.com. But you got to forward me the order so I know you did it. Ross@rosstucker.com. Backofficescheduler.com. HumanHeadNYC.com. Sporticulture.